Picture this. You're 6 months pregnant, standing in a boardroom full of shareholders, and your husband, the CEO, just told you to focus on nursery colors instead of numbers you don't understand. Everyone laughs, but what they don't know? What he doesn't know, you secretly own 60% of his company. This is the true story of Victoria Sterling, a brilliant investment banker who watched her husband systematically erase her for 3 years, taking credit for her strategies, dismissing her intelligence, humiliating her publicly. While pregnant, she did something extraordinary, something dangerous, something that would destroy her marriage but save her soul. She bought his empire, in secret. And at the next shareholders meeting, she introduced herself properly. This is a story about quiet power, strategic revenge, and what happens when a dismissed wife decides she's done being invisible. Stay with me, because Victoria is about to teach us all a masterclass in justice. The crystal water pitcher shattered against the mahogany table as Victoria Sterling's hand jerked involuntarily. 6 months pregnant and standing before the quarterly shareholders meeting, she watched water spread across the polished wood like her dignity pooling at her feet. The boardroom fell silent except for the air conditioning's relentless hum. Too cold. Always too cold in this building. "Darling," Preston Sterling said from his position at the head of the table, his voice dripping with condescension. "Perhaps you should concern yourself with nursery colors rather than numbers you don't understand." Laughter rippled through the room. Marcus Brennan smirked from across the table. Diane Sterling, Preston's mother, examined her manicured nails with practiced disinterest. Only Julian Cross seemed uncomfortable, shifting in his leather chair. Victoria's silk maternity dress suddenly felt too tight. Her face burned. The baby kicked hard against her ribs, as if saying, "Fight back. Mom, don't cry. Don't you dare cry." That's what he wants. She'd only asked a simple question about the third quarter projections. Numbers that didn't align with the she'd reviewed last week. Numbers that suggested someone was cooking the books. Preston continued as if she hadn't spoken, clicking to the next slide with his remote. "As you can see, our 5-year expansion strategy projects 35% growth across all sectors." Victoria's breath caught. His 5-year expansion strategy, the one she'd drafted during her first trimester while battling morning sickness so severe she'd kept a trash can beside her desk. The strategy she'd built from her investment banking contacts, her market analysis, her late-night research. Her strategy, his presentation. She lowered herself back into her chair, movements careful around her swollen belly. The baby kicked again. Harder this time. "The European market presents our greatest opportunity," Preston said, gesturing at charts Victoria had created. "I've identified 3 key acquisition targets that will position us as industry leaders." I identified them, Victoria thought. "I spent 2 months analyzing those companies. I built the financial models. I negotiated preliminary terms with 2 of the 3 CEOs. But she said nothing, just pressed her hands against her belly and counted ceiling tiles. Victoria did what she always did when humiliated. She counted ceiling tiles, 42 acoustic tiles in the boardroom. She'd memorized them during the 8 meetings where Preston had talked over her, dismissed her, or worse, acted like she wasn't there at all. 1, 2, 3, 4. "Of course," Marcus Brennan added, his voice oily with false enthusiasm. "Preston's vision for the company has been nothing short of revolutionary. The board is fortunate to have such strong leadership." 5, 6, 7, 8. Usher. Preston beamed, accepting praise for work he hadn't done, for strategies he hadn't conceived, for relationships Victoria had cultivated over 10 years in investment banking before she'd made the mistake of falling in love with him. 9, 10, 11, 12. Eleanor Hartwick, Victoria's former boss and mentor, sat in the back corner. Their eyes met briefly. Eleanor's expression remained neutral, but Victoria caught the slight nod, the signal they discussed over lunch last week. "When the time comes, you'll know," Eleanor had said. The time was coming. Victoria could feel it approaching like thunder before a storm. "We'll break for 15 minutes, Preston announced, checking his Rolex. The watch Victoria had bought him for their 2nd anniversary. "Reconvene for the financial review." The board members stood, conversations erupting. Preston gathered his papers, already turning toward the door where Bethany Monroe waited, his assistant. 26 years old with a perfect posture and ambitious eyes. Preston walked past Victoria without a glance. Bethany's heels clicked in perfect rhythm with his footsteps down the marble hallway. Victoria remained seated, hands still pressed against her belly. Around her, board members filed out, most avoiding eye contact. Julian Cross paused beside her chair. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly. She looked up at him. Julian had been neutral in most board politics, voting based on merit rather than allegiance. She'd always respected that. "I'm fine," she said. The lie tasted bitter. "That was unnecessarily harsh," Julian said. "For what it's worth, your question about the projections was valid. The numbers don't track with the previous quarter's performance." Victoria's pulse quickened, so someone else had noticed the discrepancies. "Thank you," she managed. Julian nodded and left, leaving Victoria alone in the cold boardroom with 42 ceiling tiles and the ghost of her husband's contempt. But what Preston didn't know, what nobody in that room knew, was that the wife he'd just humiliated held 60% of his empire in her carefully manicured hands. Victoria pulled her phone from her purse. One new email from Eleanor, time-stamped 3 minutes ago. The subject line was blank. The message contained only 2 words. "It's done." Victoria deleted the email and stood carefully, one hand supporting her lower back. Her reflection stared back from the darkened windows overlooking the city. 42 floors up. She'd helped Preston build this view. She'd earned this view with her contacts, her strategies, her late nights and early mornings. 3 years ago, she'd walked into this building as Preston Sterling's brilliant new wife, the former investment banker who'd given up her career to support his dream. Everyone assumed she had gotten pregnant to trap him, that she'd traded her ambition for his money. They were wrong. Victoria had been patient, strategic. While Preston dismissed her and humiliated her and took credit for her work, she'd been building something he couldn't see, something he'd never suspect. She touched her belly, feeling the baby's movements. Strong kicks. Her daughter was a fighter. "Your mom's about to do something crazy," Victoria whispered, "but you'll understand someday." The boardroom door opened. Sophie Bennett, Victoria's best friend since college, poked her head in. She wasn't supposed to be here, but Sophie had a talent for showing up exactly when needed. "I was in the building for a meeting and saw Preston leave looking smug," Sophie said, "which means you need coffee and possibly bail money." Victoria laughed despite everything. "Just coffee." They walked to the elevator together. Sophie pressed the button for the lobby. "How bad?" Sophie asked. "He told me to focus on nursery colors in front of the entire board." Sophie's jaw tightened. "I'm going to key his car." "Don't, I have a better plan." The elevator descended. Victoria watched the floor numbers decrease. 42, 41, 40. Her entire marriage had been a descent, slow and steady, floor by floor, until she'd found herself in the basement of her own life. But basements made excellent foundations for rebuilding. "Whatever you're planning," Sophie said, reading her expression, "I'm here for it." Victoria smiled, a real smile this time. "I know." They exited into the lobby. Outside, the city bustled with afternoon traffic, people rushing to meetings, to coffee shops, to lives where their husbands didn't publicly humiliate them. Victoria's phone buzzed, a text from Preston. "Working late, don't wait up." No apology, no acknowledgement of what he'd done, just another dismissal. She typed back quickly, "Okay, see you tomorrow." Then she turned to Sophie. "Actually, I need something stronger than coffee." They found a quiet wine bar 2 blocks away. Victoria ordered sparkling water with lime. Sophie ordered bourbon. "Tell me everything," Sophie said. So Victoria did. She explained the shell companies. The careful stock purchases over 8 months, the legal structures Eleanor had helped her create, the 60% ownership she'd accumulated, while Preston was busy dismissing her intelligence. Sophie listened, her bourbon forgotten. "You bought his company," Sophie said slowly, "while pregnant, without him knowing." "I bought our company," Victoria corrected, "the one I helped build, the one I have just as much right to own." "When are you going to tell him?" Victoria sipped her sparkling water. The lime was perfectly fresh. 2 weeks, at the next shareholders meeting, when he presents his annual review and takes credit for another year of my work. He's going to lose his mind. Probably. Sophie raised her bourbon glass. To karma, and to the scariest pregnant woman I've ever met. Victoria clinked her water glass against Sophie's bourbon. Through the window, she could see Preston's building piercing the skyline. Her building now. Legally. Completely. Undeniably. The baby kicked. Victoria pressed her hand to the spot, feeling her daughter's strength. "Mommy's got this," she whispered. Victoria sat in her car in the underground parking garage, engine off, hands gripping the steering wheel. She couldn't bring herself to drive. Not yet. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in sickly yellow. 3 months ago, she would have gone home and pretended it didn't hurt. She would have made Preston's favorite dinner, that complicated beef Wellington he loved. She would have smoothed everything over with a smile and soft words in the erasure of her own dignity. I was being the perfect corporate wife. Quiet, supportive, invisible. But something had changed. Maybe it was the pregnancy hormones everyone kept blaming for her emotions. Maybe it was finally reaching the breaking point after 3 years of systematic dismissal. Or maybe it was simpler than that. Maybe she'd just gotten tired of disappearing. Her phone buzzed, a text from her obstetrician's office reminding her about tomorrow's appointment. 24 weeks, viability. The word had haunted her since her last visit. Viable, capable of surviving independently. She wondered if that applied to her too. Victoria's mind drifted back 2 years, to when everything still felt possible. She'd been fresh from her investment banking career at Morrison & Hartwick, one of the top firms in the city. 10 years climbing that ladder. Vice president at 28. On track for senior vice president before 30. Then she'd met Preston at a charity gala. Charming, ambitious, building his father's small manufacturing company into something significant. He'd been fascinated by her work, asking intelligent questions about market strategy and acquisition structures. "You're brilliant," he'd said over champagne. "Most beautiful woman in the room and the smartest." She'd fallen for it. For him. They'd married 6 months later. Victoria had helped him restructure his company's debt, negotiate better vendor contracts, identify expansion opportunities. Late nights at his office, her spreadsheets glowing on his computer screen. Her contacts opening doors he couldn't access alone. Her strategy transforming his struggling business into a thriving enterprise. Then she got pregnant. Everything changed the day I showed him the positive test. I became decorative, breakable, dismissed. The shift had been subtle at first. Preston started introducing her as my wife instead of by name. He'd interrupt her during meetings to explain things she already understood. He'd begun taking credit for strategies they'd developed together, rewording her ideas as his own insights. By her second trimester, he'd stopped consulting her entirely, just expected her to show up at events, smile appropriately, and avoid embarrassing him with her hormonal opinions. Victoria released the steering wheel and pressed her hands against her belly. The baby kicked in response, strong and insistent. "I know," she whispered. "I know." Her phone buzzed again. This time a text from Eleanor Hartwick. "Coffee tomorrow, my office, 9 a.m. That coffee meeting 8 months ago had changed everything. Victoria closed her eyes, remembering. She'd arrived at Eleanor's office wearing a flowing dress that hid her barely showing pregnancy. Eleanor had taken one look at her and known. Her former boss had always been perceptive. "You're pregnant," Eleanor said. Not a question. 12 weeks. They'd sat in Eleanor's corner office with its view of the harbor. Coffee for Eleanor, herbal tea for Victoria. Small talk about the weather, about mutual acquaintances, about nothing important. Then Eleanor had said, "He's taking credit for your work, isn't he?" Victoria's silence had been answer enough. Eleanor had set down her coffee cup with deliberate care. "I saw the merger announcement last month. The European expansion strategy, Preston Sterling's vision," the press release said. She'd paused. "But that's your handwriting all over it, your contacts, your analysis." "It was collaborative," Victoria had said weakly. "Don't insult my intelligence. I trained you. I know how you think. That deal has your fingerprints everywhere." Eleanor had leaned forward. "What's he giving you in return? Credit? Respect? Or just the privilege of watching him build an empire on your blueprints?" The words had cracked something open in Victoria's chest. "I love him," she'd said. I'm sure you do. But does he respect you? Victoria had wanted to say yes. Had wanted to defend her marriage, her choices, her husband. But the words wouldn't come. Eleanor had waited, patient as always. He called me hormonal in front of the executive team last week, Victoria had finally admitted. I questioned a vendor contract that seemed overpriced. He laughed and told everyone pregnant women get emotional about details. The contract was overpriced by 40%. And was your analysis correct? Yes. Eleanor had nodded slowly. Here's what I see. A brilliant strategist being systematically erased by a mediocre man who's terrified of her talent. A woman who's about to have a baby with someone who doesn't value her intelligence. A wife who's built her husband's empire and received humiliation as payment. The accuracy had been devastating. What do I do? Victoria had whispered. Eleanor had smiled, a sharp, dangerous smile Victoria recognized from tough negotiations. What if you already owned the company and nobody knew it? Now sitting in her car 8 months later, Victoria marveled at how simple Eleanor's plan had been, how elegant, how perfectly legal. 3 shell companies, limited liability corporations registered under Victoria's maiden name, Ashford, each with clean documentation, proper tax structures, legitimate business purposes. Eleanor had handled the legal work personally. Over 6 months, those 3 companies had purchased Sterling Industries shares through careful, strategic transactions. Small acquisitions that flew under disclosure requirements. Private purchases from shareholders looking to liquidate. Nothing that triggered the automatic reporting thresholds. It sounded like a movie. But desperate women do extraordinary things. Victoria had used her trust fund, the inheritance from her grandmother that Preston had never asked about because he'd assumed she needed him financially. The money she'd kept separate, invested conservatively, never mentioned. Turned out her grandmother's retail empire had been worth considerably more than Preston imagined. Each share purchase had been agonizing. Victoria had done the research late at night after Preston fell asleep. She'd met with Eleanor in hospital parking lots, in coffee shops across town, anywhere Preston wouldn't accidentally see them together. She'd felt like a criminal, like she was betraying her marriage, her vows, everything she believed about partnership. Then Preston had interrupted her during a board meeting to suggest she was too pregnant to understand the financial reports. After that, buying shares felt less like betrayal and more like survival. Victoria started her car. The engine purred to life. She needed to go home, but the thought of facing Preston in their penthouse made her stomach clench. Instead, she drove to the waterfront, parked near the pier where she and Preston had had their second date, back when he'd listened to her ideas, back when he'd valued her mind as much as her appearance. Or had he? Had she imagined that respect? Had she projected what she wanted to see onto a man who'd always planned to diminish her? The water was gray under cloudy skies. Seagulls circled overhead, their cries sharp in the wind. Victoria's phone rang. Preston. She let it go to voicemail. 30 seconds later, he tried again. She answered on the third ring. Hello? Where are you? His voice was irritated. Driving. Why? Mother wants to finalize the baby shower plans. She's at the penthouse. Of course Diane was, planning Victoria's baby shower without Victoria. I'll be home in 20 minutes. Make it 10. She has bridge club at 6. He hung up without waiting for her response. Victoria sat there, phone in hand, watching the water. 42 floors up in Preston's building, she could see everything. Down here at sea level, the view was different, humbling, real. She thought about the baby growing inside her daughter, according to the anatomy scan last month, a girl who would grow up watching how her parents treated each other, learning what kind of love was acceptable, what kind of diminishment was normal, what kind of woman survives by making herself small. No, Victoria thought, not my daughter. She'll learn something different. She started driving home, navigating familiar streets in the late afternoon traffic. The city was beautiful this time of year, spring turning to summer, everything blooming, pushing through concrete to find sunlight. Eleanor had said something during one of their clandestine meetings. They'd been reviewing share purchase agreements in Eleanor's car, parked behind a grocery store like drug dealers conducting a transaction. You know what most people don't understand about power? Eleanor had said. It's not about being loud. It's not about demanding attention. Real power is quiet. It's having all the cards and letting everyone think you're holding nothing. That sounds exhausting, Victoria had replied. It is. But you know what's more exhausting? Being brilliant while everyone treats you like you're decorative. Victoria had signed the purchase agreement without further hesitation. Now pulling into the underground parking garage of her building, Victoria felt the weight of her secret settling over her shoulders. 2 more weeks, 14 days. Then everyone would know, then Preston would know. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, she felt something closer to peace. She rode the elevator to the 42nd floor. Each ascending number felt significant. 42 ceiling tiles, 42 floors, 42 weeks until the baby arrived. The universe seemed to be sending a message. Diane Sterling was holding court in Victoria's living room when she entered, surrounded by fabric swatches and catering menus. Preston sat on the couch checking his phone, barely acknowledging Victoria's arrival. Finally, Diane said, glancing at her watch, "We have decisions to make." "Sorry," Victoria said automatically, then caught herself. Why was she apologizing? Traffic was heavy. Diane pursed her lips. "For the baby shower, I'm thinking something understated, elegant. We don't want people thinking this pregnancy was strategic." The implication hung there, that Victoria had trapped Preston, that the baby was a calculated move rather than a wanted child. "Strategic how?" Victoria asked, her voice carefully neutral. "Oh, you know," Diane waved her hand dismissively. "Young women who marry up sometimes use pregnancy to secure their position." Preston didn't look up from his phone, didn't defend Victoria, didn't correct his mother's insulting insinuation. "I'm not paranoid. I'm not hormonal. I'm not imagining things. He's systematically erasing me from my own accomplishments." "I didn't marry up," Victoria said quietly. "I had my own career, my own money, my own life before Preston." Diane laughed, a tinkling, condescending sound. "Of course, dear, your little banking job. But let's be realistic about the differences in your backgrounds." Victoria's family money was newer. Her grandfather had built a successful construction business. Her grandmother had turned that success into a retail empire. Self-made wealth, not old money like the Sterlings, who'd inherited their fortune from railroad investments 3 generations back. New money, dirty money, not respectable. Victoria looked at Preston, willing him to say something, anything. He stood, pocketing his phone. "I have dinner with clients. Don't wait up." He kissed his mother's cheek, walked past Victoria without touching her. The door closed behind him. Diane returned to her fabric swatches. "Now I'm thinking pale yellow, gender neutral, sophisticated." Victoria sat down carefully, her dress stretching over her belly. The baby kicked hard enough that Diane noticed the movement and frowned, as if even that was vulgar. "Actually," Victoria said, surprising herself, "I'd like pink. We're having a girl." Pink is so obvious. It's my baby shower. Diane looked at her with something between surprise and annoyance. "Well, I suppose you should have some say." Some say in her own baby shower for her own daughter. Victoria felt something shift inside her, not the baby, something else, something that had been building for 3 years through every dismissal, every humiliation, every moment when she'd made herself smaller to accommodate Preston's ego. "I'll plan it myself," Victoria said. "Thank you for your help, but I've got it from here." Diane's eyes narrowed. "Preston asked me to help, and I'm asking you to let me handle it." They stared at each other, a battle of wills conducted in polite tones and careful words. Finally, Diane stood. "Suit yourself, though I think you'll find event planning is more complicated than you imagine." "I negotiated a $12 million merger while running on 3 hours of sleep," Victoria said calmly. "I think I can handle ordering cake and selecting decorations." Diane left in a cloud of expensive perfume and wounded pride. Alone in her penthouse, Victoria walked to the windows overlooking the city. The sun was setting, painting everything gold and pink. Her building's shadow stretched across the neighboring structures. Her building now, legally, completely. Her phone buzzed. Eleanor saw Diane leave looking offended. "Everything okay?" Victoria smiled. Eleanor's office had a view of the building's entrance. She probably watched everyone coming and going. "Everything's perfect. Confirm for coffee tomorrow 9 a.m. Bring your appetite. We're celebrating. Victoria made herself chamomile tea with hands that only shook slightly. The baby kicked again, restless. She pressed her hand to the spot, feeling her daughter's strength. Almost time, she whispered. Mommy's got a plan. Just 2 more weeks. She thought about Preston at dinner with clients, or more likely with Bethany Monroe, his assistant with ambitious eyes. Victoria had suspected for months, had hired a private investigator in her second trimester, had photos now, evidence, dates and hotel receipts and text messages that would make a lawyer salivate. But she'd said nothing. Because hurt women are strategic women, and Victoria Ashford Sterling was nothing if not strategic. Preston came home at 2 in the morning smelling like Bethany's perfume. Victoria recognized the scent. Chanel number 5. Obvious, predictable. She pretended to be asleep, lying perfectly still, breathing slowly and evenly. It's amazing what you overhear when people think you're sleeping. Preston made 3 phone calls from the bathroom. She heard every word through the door. The baby situation is temporary, he'd said to someone. Marcus Brennan, probably, based on the tone. Once it's born, we can reassess. Reassess, like she was a failing investment. No, she doesn't suspect anything. She's too focused on the pregnancy. Victoria kept her breathing even. In, out, in, out. The baby shifted inside her, responding to her elevated heart rate. Trust me, I've got this handled. Victoria's not a problem. Not a problem. 3 years of marriage reduced to that. Preston finished his calls and came to bed. The mattress dipped under his weight. He didn't reach for her, hadn't in months, just turned his back and went to sleep within minutes, untroubled by guilt or conscience. Victoria stared at the ceiling in darkness. 27 floors above them, wealthy people slept in more expensive penthouses. 15 floors below, people with less money had the same problems. Cheating spouses, crumbling marriages, broken promises. Money didn't insulate anyone from heartbreak. It just made the betrayal happen in nicer apartments. She must have slept eventually because morning arrived with brutal sunlight through floor-to-ceiling windows. Preston was already gone. A note on his pillow. Early meeting, see you tonight. No love, no warmth, just a schedule update. Victoria made herself breakfast, moving slowly around the kitchen. 7 months pregnant now. The baby seemed to take up all available space inside her body. Her back ached constantly. Her feet swelled by noon. Simple tasks required planning and rest breaks. But her mind stayed sharp. Sharper maybe, fueled by anger and determination. She dressed carefully for her coffee meeting with Eleanor. A navy maternity dress that made her look professional despite her belly. Minimal makeup, hair pulled back. The costume of a woman in control. Eleanor's office was on the 30th floor of the Morrison and Hartwick building. Victoria had worked here once, had her own office 3 floors down. Senior Vice President Victoria Ashford, the nameplate had read. Then she'd become Mrs. Preston Sterling and given up her nameplate for someone else's empire. You look good, Eleanor said when Victoria arrived, though her expression suggested concern. How are you feeling? Pregnant, tired, ready to burn my marriage to the ground. Eleanor laughed and gestured to the sitting area by the windows. Coffee service was already prepared. Herbal tea for Victoria, espresso for Eleanor. All final transfers are complete, Eleanor said, sliding a folder across the table. 60% ownership confirmed. The documentation is airtight. I've had 3 independent attorneys review the structure. Victoria opened the folder. Pages of legal documents, each one representing the piece of Preston's empire now legally hers. He has no idea, she asked. None. The shell companies are structured perfectly. Even if he investigates, which he won't because he's too arrogant to imagine you could do this, he'd find nothing concerning. Everything was acquired legally through private sales. And the other shareholders? Have no obligation to disclose who bought their shares. You're completely protected. Victoria sipped her tea. It tasted like victory, like vindication, like justice that had been 3 years in the making. Nervous? Eleanor asked. Terrified. Good. That means you're taking this seriously. Eleanor leaned forward. Once you reveal this at the shareholders meeting, there's no going back. Preston will fight. He'll accuse you of everything from manipulation to fraud. It will get ugly. It's already ugly, Victoria said. He's just better at hiding it. Eleanor nodded. What about the baby, the stress? Victoria pressed her hand to her belly. She's strong, takes after her mother. Speaking of which, Raymond Torres sent over his final report. Eleanor produced another folder. This one was thicker, heavier. Victoria opened it slowly. Photographs spilled out. Preston and Bethany leaving hotels. Preston and Bethany at restaurants. Text message transcripts that made Victoria's stomach turn. But there was more. Financial documents showing irregular transfers. Company money flowing into Preston's personal accounts. Kickbacks from vendors. Bribes masquerading as consulting fees. He's been stealing? Victoria asked, her voice hollow. For at least 18 months. Maybe longer. Raymond traced it back through the company's financial records. Preston's been careful, but not careful enough. Victoria stared at the evidence. The affairs hurt. The humiliation stung. But this? He's been robbing the company I built with him. Every late night I worked, every client I brought in, every strategy I created. He wasn't just taking credit. He was stealing from us both. From your daughter's inheritance, Eleanor added quietly. That truth settled like lead in Victoria's chest. What do I do with this? Victoria asked. That depends. You could go to the police. Financial fraud on this scale would mean criminal charges. Or you can use it as leverage with the board when you reveal your ownership. Victoria studied the photographs. Preston's face in each one smiling, confident, untroubled by conscience. The same face that had promised to love and honor her. The same face that dismissed her intelligence and mocked her contributions. I'll take it to the board, she said finally. Let them decide his fate. Eleanor smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. They spent the next hour reviewing strategy. The shareholders' meeting was in 10 days. Eleanor had already prepared Victoria's presentation. Evidence of ownership, documentation of Preston's fraud, testimonies from former employees he'd harassed or exploited. You'll need to practice your speech, Eleanor said. Keep it professional. Don't let emotion cloud the facts. I've been keeping emotion in check for 3 years. I think I can manage 10 more days. Eleanor's expression softened. How are you really doing? Not the brave face, the truth. Victoria looked out the window at the city below. Ubering had fully arrived, trees blooming, flowers pushing through the sidewalk cracks, everything fighting for light. I loved him, she said quietly. That's the part that hurts most. Not that he betrayed me, but that I loved someone capable of this. What does that say about my judgment? It says you're human, and that he's an excellent liar. My daughter's going to ask about him someday. How do I explain that her father is a thief who cheated on her pregnant mother? You tell her the truth, that you were strong enough to stop him, that you chose her future over his ego, that some men need to be loved from a distance through lawyers and court orders. Victoria pressed both hands to her belly. The baby was quiet now, resting, gathering strength. I'm scared, Victoria admitted. What if I can't do this? What if I'm not strong enough? You bought a company in secret while pregnant. You documented fraud. You outmaneuvered a man who thinks you're decorative. Tell me again how you're not strong enough. Victoria left Eleanor's office 2 hours later with folders full of evidence and a speech to memorize. The sun was bright, almost mocking in its cheerfulness. People rushed past on the sidewalk, absorbed in their own dramas. She drove to her favorite cafe, the one where she and Preston had their first date, back when everything was possibility and promise. She ordered decaf coffee and a pastry, sitting at a window table. Her phone buzzed, a text from Preston. Working late again? Order dinner for yourself. No apology, no explanation, just another dismissal. Victoria remembered their wedding 3 years ago, the Sterling estate in Connecticut, 400 guests, an 8-piece orchestra. Preston's vows had been beautiful. You make me better. You're my equal partner. Together we'll build something extraordinary. She'd believed every word. 6 months into their marriage, she'd overheard him at a dinner party. She'd gone to the restroom, returning just as Preston started telling a story to his friends. Victoria's adorable when she tries to talk business. I just let her play with the spreadsheets. Makes her feel important. His friends had laughed. Victoria had stood in the hallway, frozen, while her husband mocked her intelligence to people she'd considered friends. She'd said nothing that night, had gone home, smiled, pretended everything was fine. But she'd started documenting everything, every dismissal, every time he took credit for her work, every humiliation carefully recorded in a private journal. That journal was now evidence, contemporaneous notes of systematic belittlement, pattern and practice of professional sabotage. Victoria finished her coffee and walked through the park across the street. Children played on playground equipment. Parents watched from benches, phones in hand, half attentive. She found an empty bench and sat carefully, hands on her belly. The baby kicked. Strong, insistent. "Hi, baby girl," Victoria whispered. "Mommy's having a complicated day." The baby kicked again. "I know you can hear me. The books say you can recognize my voice now. So I want you to know something important." A young couple walked past, holding hands, laughing at some private joke. Victoria watched them, wondering if they'd last, if their love would survive reality. "I'm going to make sure you never have to make yourself small for anyone. I'm going to show you that smart women don't apologize for being smart, that strength isn't the same as cruelty, but kindness isn't the same as weakness." The baby seemed to settle, as if listening. "Your dad, he's complicated, he's brilliant in some ways, charismatic, driven, but he's also afraid of smart women, afraid of being outshone, afraid that admitting I'm talented somehow diminishes him." Victoria's throat tightened. "I'm going to do something in 10 days that will change everything. He'll be angry. His mother will be furious. The world we built together will explode. But I'm doing it for you, for us, because you deserve a mother who fights, not one who disappears." She sat there for a long time, one hand on her belly, watching the world continue around her. Life didn't stop for personal crises. The sun still set, people still rushed to appointments, children still played. Her phone buzzed. "Sophie. Wine bar, I'm buying. Which means sparkling water for you and actual wine for me." Victoria smiled. "Yes, I need a friend." "Already there. Corner booth. Hurry before I start without you." The wine bar was quiet this time of afternoon. Sophie had indeed started without her, a glass of red wine already half empty. "Rough day?" Victoria asked, sliding into the booth. "Client from hell. But your day's probably worse. You have that look." "What look?" "The I'm about to do something either brilliant or insane, and possibly both look." Victoria ordered sparkling water with lime. The waitress brought it with a sympathetic smile, as if she understood the injustice of pregnancy prohibiting wine. "I met with Eleanor this morning." "Everything's ready." Sophie leaned forward. "Tell me you're having doubts. Tell me you're going to back out and we can torch his car instead." "No doubts, just fear. Fear is healthy. Fear means you understand the stakes." "He's stealing from the company, Sophie. Not just taking credit for my work. Actually embezzling, kickbacks, fraud, criminal stuff." Sophie's expression darkened. "That bastard. What are you going to do, Go? Take it to the board with the ownership revelation. Let them decide whether to involve authorities. He's going to try to destroy you. He's been destroying me for 3 years. At least now I'm fighting back." Sophie raised her wine glass. "To fighting back and to terrifying pregnant women who buy companies in secret." Victoria clinked her water glass against Sophie's wine. "To surviving." They sat in comfortable silence, two friends who'd known each other long enough that words weren't always necessary. Sophie had been there when Victoria met Preston, had been maid of honor at the wedding, had watched Victoria slowly dim over 3 years of marriage. "Can I ask you something?" Sophie said finally. "And I want an honest answer." "Always." "Do you still love him?" Victoria considered the question. Did she? The man she'd married no longer existed. Maybe he never had. Maybe she'd loved a projection, a fantasy, a version of Preston that only appeared when convenient. "I love who I thought he was," Victoria said slowly. "I love the man who promised we were equals. But that man was a lie. So no, I don't love Preston Sterling. I mourn the marriage I thought I had, but I don't love the reality." Sophie nodded. Good, because you can't fight someone you still love. You'll hold back. You'll compromise. You'll let them convince you it's your fault. Is that experience talking? Painful experience. The worst kind. They finished their drinks and parted with long hugs. Sophie squeezed extra tight. You've got this, Sophie whispered. You're the strongest person I know. Victoria drove home as sunset painted the sky orange and pink. The penthouse was empty when she arrived, Preston still working late, or pretending to work while he was actually with Bethany. She made herself dinner, pasta with vegetables, something healthy for the baby. She ate alone at their massive dining table, the silence oppressive. After dinner, she went to the nursery. They'd converted Preston's home office into a baby room 3 months ago. Victoria had done most of the work herself while Preston was traveling for business. The walls were soft yellow, gender neutral, despite knowing they were having a girl. Victoria hadn't wanted pink, hadn't wanted obvious. She'd wanted something gentle and warm. She sat in the rocking chair she'd assembled herself, touching fabric swatches for curtains. Outside, the city glittered, 42 floors up, high enough to see everything, high enough to imagine flying. Victoria did what she did best when overwhelmed. She sat in the nursery alone at 2 in the morning when Preston had finally come home and gone straight to bed without checking on her. Painting sample cards spread on the floor around her, soft yellow, soft, gentle green, warm cream. She touched each one, feeling their textures. The room smelled like fresh paint and possibility. She'd painted it herself 2 weeks ago while Preston was in Chicago, or claiming to be in Chicago. The private investigator's report suggested he was actually at a resort in Michigan with Bethany. Victoria pressed her hand to her belly. Your mom's about to do something that will change everything, but you'll understand someday. I'm doing this so you never have to make yourself invisible to make a man feel big. The baby kicked. Victoria smiled through sudden tears. I'm okay. We're okay. Better than okay. We're about to be free. The Sterling Industries Spring Charity Gala was held at the Metropolitan Museum. 200 donors in evening wear, champagne flowing, art as backdrop to networking and social climbing. Victoria wore a floor-length maternity gown in deep emerald. It had cost more than her first car. Preston had insisted she look appropriate for such an important event. She'd almost refused, then decided the dress was armor, war paint, the costume of a woman who knew secrets. Preston worked the room with practiced charm. Victoria stayed close enough to maintain appearances, far enough to avoid actual conversation. His hand occasionally touched her lower back. Performative affection for public consumption. Bathroom, she murmured, and slipped away. She found Bethany Monroe near the champagne fountain, looking uncomfortable in a dress too young for the setting. 26 years old trying to look 35. It wasn't working. Victoria approached with deliberate calm. Bethany, you look lovely. Bethany startled. Mrs. Sterling, thank you. Can we talk? Somewhere private? Confusion flickered across Bethany's face. I don't think that's appropriate. Neither is sleeping with my husband, yet here we are. Bethany went pale. Her champagne glass trembled slightly. Victoria gestured to a quiet alcove away from the main gallery. Please, I'm not going to cause a scene. I just want to talk. They moved to the alcove. Museum security stood discreetly nearby, attentive to the pregnant woman who might need assistance. How long have you been sleeping with Preston? Victoria asked, her voice conversational, as if discussing the weather. Bethany's eyes filled with tears. I'm not. Please don't insult my intelligence. I have photographs, hotel receipts, text messages. I hired a private investigator 4 months ago. I know everything. Bethany's composure shattered. Tears spilled down her carefully made-up face. I don't blame you, Victoria continued quietly. He's very convincing, charismatic, powerful. Did he tell you I'm boring? That I trapped him with the baby? Bethany nodded miserably. He's lying about me, about you, about everything. Victoria shifted, her back aching. The baby kicked, as if offering a support. Can I tell you something? You're not the first? Bethany looked up. What? Before you, there was Melissa, his previous assistant. Before her, someone from accounting. Preston has a pattern. He finds ambitious young women, promises them advancement, makes them feel special, then moves on when they start expecting the promises to materialize. He said I was different. He said that to all of them. Bethany wiped her eyes, mascara streaking. Why are you telling me this? Because in 10 days, I'm going to destroy him professionally. And you have a choice. You can go down with him, or you can walk away clean. I don't understand. Victoria pulled an envelope from her clutch. This contains a severance agreement, 3 months' salary, a reference letter for your next position, and a promise that I won't include you in the evidence I'm presenting to the board. Evidence? Preston's been embezzling, financial fraud, kickbacks, criminal activity that will likely result in charges. Anyone closely associated with him will face scrutiny. Bethany stared at the envelope like it might explode. All I need from you, Victoria said, is a statement about his pattern of behavior with female employees. Not about the affair, just about his professional conduct, inappropriate comments, promises of advancement in exchange for personal loyalty, the harassment that happens before the affairs start. He'll destroy me. He's already destroying you. You've just been too blinded by his attention to see it. Victoria touched Bethany's arm gently. I was you once, not the affair, but the dismissal. The realization that the man you believed in sees you as disposable. Bethany's tears fell faster. Why would you help me? Because my daughter is going to ask me someday what kind of woman her mother was. I want to be the kind who helps other women escape, even the ones sleeping with her husband. And what Victoria didn't tell Bethany was that she'd already secured testimonies from 2 former assistants Preston had harassed. Bethany's cooperation would be the final piece. The mistress was about to become the witness. Bethany took the envelope with shaking hands. Can I think about it? You have 48 hours. After that, I go to the board without your statement. They returned to the gala separately. Preston found Victoria minutes later, his expression annoyed. Where were you? Bathroom, baby on bladder. He accepted the excuse without interest, already scanning the room for more important people to network with. Victoria watched him work the crowd. Charming, persuasive. Everyone thought he was brilliant. A self-made success, a devoted husband about to become a father. They had no idea he was a house of cards waiting for wind. 3 days later, Bethany's statement arrived at Eleanor's office. 10 pages detailing Preston's pattern of harassment. Promises made and broken, inappropriate behavior documented with dates and witnesses. She came through, Eleanor said, sliding the document across her desk. This is damning. Victoria read through it, feeling sad rather than triumphant. Bethany hadn't wanted to be the other woman. She'd wanted career advancement. Preston had manipulated that ambition into something else. Did you give her the severance? Already transferred. She submitted her resignation this morning, cited family reasons. Is she okay? As okay as anyone can be after realizing they've been used. Eleanor studied Victoria. You were generous with her. I was strategic. Angry women tell the truth. Grateful women tell better truths. You're getting cynical. I'm getting realistic. Victoria left Eleanor's office and drove to her favorite park, the same bench where she'd talked to her unborn daughter. The playground was busy today, children shrieking with joy on swings and slides. She sat carefully, both hands on her belly, 7.5 months now. The baby was running out of room to move. Every kick felt significant. Big week coming up, Victoria whispered. Mommy's about to do something that will change both our lives. The baby responded with a strong kick. Victoria smiled. A young mother sat on the bench beside her, holding a sleeping infant. They exchanged tired smiles, the universal language of women managing pregnancy and early motherhood. How far along? The woman asked. 30 weeks. Almost there. It goes fast. Victoria wanted to say it hadn't gone fast at all, that these 8 months had been the longest of her life, that she'd spent them planning a corporate coup while growing a human and mourning her marriage. Instead, she said, I'm ready. First? Yes. Advice? Trust your instincts. Everyone will have opinions, but you'll know what your baby needs. You'll surprise yourself with how strong you are. The woman left a few minutes later, infant secured in a stroller, off to whatever challenges new motherhood presented. Trust your instincts. Victoria's instincts said, burn it all down, said, stop protecting a man who'd never protected her, said, show her daughter that smart women don't tolerate disrespect. Her phone buzzed. Preston, emergency board call at 4. Need you home to babysit mother. She's having the decorator over for the nursery. Victoria stared at the text he hadn't asked, hadn't considered that she might have plans, just assumed she'd accommodate whatever he needed. She typed back, I'm busy. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. It's important. Please. Please, the word he used when he wanted something. Never when he was apologizing, never when acknowledging her feelings. No, Victoria typed. Handle your mother yourself. She turned off her phone before he could respond. The hardest part isn't the betrayal. The hardest part is admitting, Marie, I knew all along that he never saw me as an equal. I convinced myself that love would be enough, that supporting him would earn his respect. But you can't earn respect from someone who thinks you're beneath them. Victoria sat on that bench for 2 hours, watching children play, feeling her daughter move inside her. Spring afternoon turning to evening, the world continuing despite her personal crisis. When she finally went home, Preston was furious. Where have you been? I called 12 times. My phone died. Mother was upset. She waited for you. She can decorate the nursery without me. It's not like my opinion matters anyway. Preston's jaw tightened. That's not fair. What's not fair is you assuming I have nothing better to do than accommodate your mother's schedule. She's trying to help. She's trying to control, like you control. Like everyone in your family controls everything around them until there's no room left for anyone else's needs. Preston looked genuinely shocked. Victoria never pushed back, never complained, never made waves. Are you okay? He asked. Is this a pregnancy thing? It's a my husband treats me like an employee instead of a wife thing. That's ridiculous. Is it? When's the last time you asked about my day, my feelings, my needs? When's the last time you saw me as a person instead of an inconvenient pregnant woman cluttering up your successful life? Preston's phone rang. He glanced at it. I need to take this. Of course he did. He walked to his office, closing the door. Victoria stood in their expansive living room, 42 floors above the city, feeling more alone than she'd ever felt. 7 more days, 168 hours, then everyone would know. Then Preston would finally see her. Really see her. Not the decorative wife he'd created in his mind, but the strategic, brilliant, dangerous woman who'd been hiding in plain sight all along. Victoria went to the nursery and locked the door. She pulled out her speech notes, the presentation Eleanor had prepared, the evidence of ownership, the documentation of fraud. She practiced her opening line in the mirror. Good afternoon. For those who don't know me, I'm Victoria Ashford Sterling, and as of today, I'm the majority shareholder of Sterling Industries. Her reflection stared back, pregnant, tired, determined, ready. Diane Sterling's country club was all white linens and hushed conversations. Old money pretending new money didn't exist. Victoria had been coming here for 3 years, never quite belonging despite her marriage to Preston. Today she'd requested this lunch. Diane had agreed with obvious surprise. They sat on the terrace overlooking the golf course. Diane ordered salad with dressing on the side. Victoria ordered pasta with extra sauce, too tired to pretend she wasn't hungry. You look exhausted, Diane said, the words somewhere between observation and criticism. 7 months pregnant will do that. When I was pregnant with Preston, I never let myself go like this. Victoria bit back her first 3 responses and went with, I'm growing a human. I'm allowed to look tired. Diane's eyes narrowed slightly. Victoria wasn't usually this direct. Their food arrived. They ate in strained silence. Around them, other women lunched and gossiped and performed their roles in this carefully choreographed social hierarchy. I need to tell you something, Victoria said finally, and I need you to listen without interrupting. Diane set down her fork with deliberate precision. That sounds ominous. Preston is about to lose his company. Diane laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound. That's absurd. The company is thriving. Is it? Or is that what Preston wants you to believe? What are you implying? Victoria pulled documents from her bag, financial projections, expense reports, analysis showing unsustainable growth patterns. Preston's expansion plans are reckless. He's mortgaging our stability for ego projects that won't pay off for years. In 18 months, maybe less, Sterling Industries will face bankruptcy. Diane skimmed the documents, her expression shifting from dismissive to concerned. Where did you get this? I still have friends in investment banking, people who review companies for acquisition potential. They won't touch Sterling Industries with 10-foot poles because the fundamentals are unstable. Preston wouldn't be that reckless. Victoria leaned forward. Diane, I need you to hear something difficult. Preston is exactly like his father was. Diane's composure cracked. Don't. Your husband had affairs. He made bad business decisions driven by ego. He humiliated you publicly while pretending to be a devoted family man. Preston learned everything from watching him. My marriage is none of your concern. It is when history is repeating itself. Preston has affairs. He makes reckless business decisions. He humiliates me publicly, and I refuse to spend the next 30 years accepting it like you did. Diane's face was pale. Her hands trembled slightly as she set down the financial documents. What do you want from me? Your trust holds 8% of Sterling Industries shares. Preston controls 40%. I need you to side with me to save the company. Side with you how? Victoria took a breath. This was the moment, the reveal that would change everything. I own 60% of Sterling Industries. I've been acquiring shares through shell companies for the past 8 months. I'm the majority shareholder, and I'm going to remove Preston as CEO. Diane stared. That's impossible. It's documented, legal, unassailable. In 4 days, I'm revealing this at the shareholders meeting. Combined with your 8%, we'll have unassailable control. You want me to betray my son? I want you to save your granddaughter's inheritance. Preston is driving this company into the ground. The question is, do you love your son enough to stop him? Diane's champagne glass had left a ring of condensation on the white tablecloth. She traced it with one finger, her expression unreadable. Why are you really doing this? Diane asked quietly. Is it the affairs, the humiliation, or is it something else? It's all of it, but mostly it's survival. I can't let my daughter grow up watching her father treat her mother like she's worthless. I can't model that kind of acceptance. So you'll destroy his career instead? I'll save the company he's destroying. There's a difference, Wadam. They sat in silence. A waiter refilled water glasses. Somewhere on the golf course, men shouted about bad shots. He wasn't always like this, Diane said finally. Preston, when he was young, he was kind, thoughtful. Then his father started grooming him to take over the business, and everything changed. What happened? My husband told him that kindness was weakness, that emotional men don't succeed, that women were either mothers or distraction, nothing in between. Diane's eyes were wet. I watched my sweet boy turn into his father. I said nothing, did nothing, just accepted it as the cost of our lifestyle. You were trapped too. I had choices. I chose wrong over and over for 40 years. Diane looked at Victoria directly. You're choosing differently. I'm trying. What happens to Preston after this? That depends on him. If he cooperates, accepts the reality, he can stay involved in a limited capacity. If he fights, the board will see the evidence of embezzlement and fraud. He could face criminal charges. Diane closed her eyes. He's been stealing? For at least 18 months. That stupid, arrogant boy. Diane's voice was thick with emotion, just like his father. Thinking rules don't apply to him. Will you help me? Diane opened her eyes. They were red but determined. What do you need? Your proxy votes at the shareholders meeting. Your support when Preston tries to fight back. Your willingness to choose your granddaughter over your son. That's a terrible choice. It's the only choice. We can save the company and protect the baby's future, or we can let Preston destroy everything because we're too afraid to stop him. Diane signaled for the check. I need to think about this. You have 3 days. They left the country club separately. Victoria felt hollowed out, wrung dry. The conversation had cost her more than she'd anticipated. She sat in her car in the parking lot, hands shaking. What was she doing? Turning a mother against her son, destroying a family, breaking vows and trust and everything marriage was supposed to mean. What am I doing? I'm 7 months pregnant, planning a corporate coup against my husband. This is insane. Women don't do this. Wives don't do this. Except I'm not just his wife. I built this empire too. I bled for this company. I earned every share I secretly bought. And if I don't stop him, there'll be nothing left for our daughter. Nothing except his ego and his excuses. Victoria's phone rang. Eleanor. How did it go? I don't know. She didn't say no. That's promising. Or she's calling Preston right now to warn him. She won't. Diane Sterling has been watching her son become her husband for 30 years. Trust me, she's tired of it. Victoria drove aimlessly for an hour, letting the city scroll past her windows. She ended up at the waterfront again, her thinking spot, the place where she could see clearly. The water was gray today, storm clouds gathering, rain coming. Her phone buzzed. A text from Diane. I'm in. God help us both. Victoria read the message 3 times, making sure she understood correctly. Diane Sterling had chosen her granddaughter over her son. Victoria replied simply, thank you. Then she sat in her car and cried, not from sadness or triumph or fear, just from the sheer exhaustion of carrying this weight for 8 months, of planning and scheming and lying and pretending while building her secret empire. The rain started, soft at first, then harder. Victoria watched it drum against her windshield, the city blurring into abstract shapes. Her daughter kicked, strong, insistent kicks that said, keep going, Mom. I'm trying, Victoria whispered. I'm so tired, but I'm trying. That evening, Preston came home late again. Victoria was in the nursery arranging baby clothes Sophie had given her, tiny outfits that seemed impossibly small. Mother called, Preston said from the doorway. She said you two had lunch. We did. She seemed upset. Did she say why? No, just that you'd had an intense conversation. Preston leaned against the doorframe, studying her. What's going on with you lately? What do you mean? You're different, distant. You're not yourself. Victoria wanted to laugh. Not herself. She was more herself than she'd been in 3 years. The fog of diminishment was lifting. The real Victoria was emerging from under layers of accommodation and self-erasure. Maybe I'm just tired, she said. It's more than that. She looked at him. Really looked. Tried to find the man she'd married, the one who'd promised partnership and respect. He wasn't there. Maybe he never had been. 4 more days until the shareholders meeting, she said. Your big annual presentation. Right, I'm ready. He smiled, confident. This year's review is going to impress everyone. I'm sure it will. He left to make phone calls. Victoria stayed in the nursery, holding tiny baby clothes, feeling the weight of what was coming. She pulled out her phone and typed a message to Eleanor. Diane's in. We have the votes we need. Eleanor responded immediately. Then there's no going back now. Victoria looked around the nursery. Yellow walls, white furniture, a mobile hanging over the crib with moons and stars. She'd built this room while planning her husband's professional destruction. The contradiction should have bothered her. Instead, it felt right. She was creating space for new life while demolishing the structures that would suffocate that life. She was building and destroying simultaneously. Creation through controlled demolition. No going back, Victoria whispered to the empty room. Only forward. Raymond Torres had the kind of face that disappeared in crowds. Average height, average build, forgettable features. The perfect private investigator. They met in a hospital parking lot. Victoria was there for her 32-week checkup. Raymond sat in a gray sedan 3 rows over. She slid into his passenger seat carefully, her belly barely fitting. Final report, Raymond said, handing her a flash drive. Everything's on here, encrypted. Password is your grandmother's middle name. Tell me. 5 affairs in 3 years. Bethany Monroe is the current one. Before her was Melissa Chen, his previous assistant. Before her, Amanda Pierce from accounting. Before her, 2 women whose names I couldn't confirm, but whose patterns match. Victoria's stomach turned. 5 women, 5 betrayals. 5 times Preston had looked at someone who wasn't his wife and decided she was disposable. But that's not the worst part, Raymond continued. The embezzlement goes back 20 months. He's been funneling company money through shell vendors, kickbacks disguised as consulting fees, personal investments made with corporate funds. How much? $1.2 million, Susie. The number hit like a physical blow. Over $1 million stolen from the company she'd helped build. Can you prove it? Raymond pulled out a folder. Bank records, email exchanges, text messages between Preston and Marcus Brennan coordinating the transfers. It's airtight. Victoria flipped through the documentation. Page after page of evidence. Preston's signature on suspicious contracts. Emails discussing personal investments using corporate accounts. Text messages that were practically confessions. He was so sloppy, she said. Arrogant men usually are. They don't think they'll get caught. What about criminal charges? That's complicated. The DA would need to decide if it's worth prosecuting. White-collar crime gets tricky. But at minimum, he'd face civil suits from the company and possibly shareholders. Victoria touched her belly. The baby had been quiet today. Resting, saving energy. Can I ask you something? Raymond said. Why hire me at all? You're doing this whole corporate takeover thing. Why not let that be enough? Because I needed to know the truth, not suspicions, not paranoia, the actual truth. Even if the truth hurt, especially if the truth hurt, you can't make good decisions based on bad information. Raymond nodded. For what it's worth, I've done this job for 15 years. I've seen a lot of cheating spouses. Your husband is one of the most flagrant. He doesn't even try to hide it. That's because he thinks I'm too stupid to notice, or too in love to care. Victoria considered that. Maybe I was, once. But love dies when it's not fed, and Preston hasn't fed our love in a very long time. She left Raymond's car and went to her obstetrician appointment. Dr. Rachel Winters was the kind of doctor who actually listened, who treated pregnancy like the complicated medical condition it was, rather than just a natural process requiring minimal intervention. How are you feeling? Dr. Winters asked after the examination. Physically? Fine. The baby's healthy. I'm managing. And emotionally, Bastien? Victoria hesitated. Is that within your scope of care? When my patient is planning major life changes while 32 weeks pregnant? Absolutely. Sophie told you. Sophie's worried. So am I. Dr. Winters pulled up a stool, settling in for a real conversation. Talk to me. So Victoria did. She explained everything. The ownership secret, the evidence of fraud, the shareholders meeting in 3 days, the destruction of her marriage. Dr. Winters listened without judgment. My concern, the doctor said finally, is the stress on you and the baby. Major emotional trauma can trigger preterm labor. I need to know you're taking care of yourself. I'm trying. Trying isn't enough. You need a support system, therapy, friends, people who can help you process what's happening. I have Sophie and Eleanor. Good, use them. Don't try to be stoic through this. You're allowed to fall apart sometimes. Victoria's eyes burned. If I fall apart, I might not come back together. Then fall apart in small, controlled ways. Let the people who love you catch the pieces. You don't have to do this alone. After the appointment, Victoria sat in her car for a long time. The flash drive from Raymond felt heavy in her purse. $1.2 million. 5 affairs. 3 years of systematic betrayal. She thought about the early days with Preston. The courtship. The romance. He'd seemed so attentive. So interested in her mind and her accomplishments. But maybe that was predatory behavior disguised as respect. Maybe he'd been evaluating her usefulness from the start. Her contacts in investment banking, her strategic mind, her ability to open doors he couldn't access alone. Maybe he'd never loved her. Maybe he'd just recognized an asset. The thought was devastating and clarifying in equal measure. Victoria drove to her favorite park, the bench that had become her thinking spot. Rain had cleared, leaving everything fresh and green. She sat carefully, both hands on her belly. A young woman jogged past, ponytail swinging, probably in her 20s, maybe planning her own life, her own career, her own future. Victoria wanted to call out to her, to warn her, to say, watch out for charming men who promise partnership but deliver diminishment. But life didn't work that way. Everyone had to learn their own lessons. Her phone buzzed. Sophie. Wine bar? You look like you need wine bar. How do you know how I look? I'm across the street. I've been following you for an hour because I'm worried and you won't answer my calls. Victoria looked up. Sure enough, Sophie stood on the other side of the street, waving. Victoria laughed despite everything. You're creepy. I'm protective. There's a difference. Now get over here. They sat at their usual table. Sophie ordered wine. Victoria ordered sparkling water and French fries. So, Sophie said, Raymond gave you the final evidence? 1.2 million embezzled. 5 affairs, criminal charges possible. Sophie swore creatively. That absolute bastard. The meeting is in 3 days. Are you ready? Victoria thought about that. Was she ready? She'd been preparing for 8 months. She knew her speech, had her evidence, had practiced her delivery until she could recite it in her sleep. But emotionally, was she ready to destroy her marriage publicly? To become the woman who brought down her husband? I don't know, Victoria admitted. Is anyone ready for something like this? Probably not, but you're doing it anyway. What if I'm making a mistake? What if there's another way? There isn't. You've tried communication. You've tried accommodation. You've made yourself smaller and quieter and more convenient. He didn't change. He got worse. What if he hates me after this? He already doesn't respect you. Hate might actually be an improvement. Victoria ate her French fries slowly. They tasted like comfort food in childhood and simpler times. Tell me something, Sophie said. If you could go back 3 years, would you still marry him? Victoria considered the question. I don't know. I'd like to think I'd see the warning signs, but I was so tired of being alone, so ready to believe someone could love me for my mind and my heart instead of just what I could do for them. That's not weakness. That's hope. Hope is expensive. So is despair. They sat in comfortable silence. The wine bar filled with happy hour crowd, people laughing, flirting, living uncomplicated lives where the biggest decision was what to order for dinner. Victoria envied them, then decided envy was pointless. Everyone had complications. Hers were just more dramatic. Can I tell you something scary? Victoria said. Always. Part of me is excited about the meeting, about finally being seen. Is that wrong? It's human. You've been invisible for 3 years. Of course you want to be seen. But it feels vindictive, like I'm enjoying his future pain. You're allowed to enjoy justice. That's not the same as cruelty. Victoria pressed her hands to her belly. The baby had woken up, moving in strong waves. Your goddaughter is very active today. Sophie smiled. She's training, getting strong for her badass mom. I'm not badass, I'm terrified. You can be both. They stayed at the wine bar until dark. Sophie walked Victoria to her car. You've got this, Sophie said, hugging her tight. 3 more days, then everyone sees what I've always seen. What's that? The strongest person I know. Victoria drove home through evening traffic. The city was beautiful at this hour, lights beginning to glow, day transitioning to night, everything in flux. Preston was already home when she arrived. Unusual. He typically worked late. We need to talk, he said. Victoria's heart rate spiked. Did he know? Had Diane told him? Had someone leaked information? About what? About us. About this distance between us. He actually looked concerned. For the first time in months, Preston was looking at her like she mattered. I know I've been distracted, he continued. The business has been consuming. But after the baby comes, things will be different. I'll be more present. Will you? I promise I want to be a good father, a good husband. Victoria studied his face. Was he sincere, or had he finally noticed her pulling away and realized he might actually lose her? Preston, what do you see when you look at me? The question surprised him. What do you mean? What do you see? Who am I to you? You're my wife, the mother of my child. That's all? What else should there be? And there it was, the truth he didn't even realize he was speaking. She was wife, mother, roles, not a person, not Victoria with her own dreams and talents and needs. Never mind, she said. I'm tired. I'm going to bed. She left him in the living room, confused and slightly hurt. Good. Let him feel a fraction of what she'd been feeling. In the nursery, Victoria sat in the dark, listening to the city sounds 42 floors below. 3 more days, 72 hours. Then everything would change. She was ready. Terrified, but ready. Sophie arrived at Victoria's penthouse at 7 in the morning, carrying coffee and bagels. She also brought a bag from an expensive baby boutique. You look terrible, Sophie announced, settling on the couch. Good morning to you, too. I'm serious. You have the shareholders meeting tomorrow. You need to sleep. I tried. My brain won't turn off. Sophie pulled baby clothes from the boutique bag, tiny outfits in soft colors. Retail therapy. If you can't sleep, at least have adorable things to stress about. Victoria held up a onesie with a embroidered giraffe. This is precious. I know, I have excellent taste. Sophie paused. Are you sure about tomorrow? Once you do this, there's no going back. Everyone keeps saying that. Because it's true. Once you reveal the ownership, once you present the fraud evidence, your marriage is over. Preston will never forgive you. His mother will never speak to you again. Your whole life as you know it ends. Good. Sophie studied her. You mean that? I do. This life is suffocating me. I'd rather breathe in rubble than suffocate in luxury. Damn. That's either wisdom or exhaustion talking. Maybe both. They ate bagels in comfortable silence. Outside, the city was waking up. Traffic building, people rushing to jobs and appointments and lives. Can I ask you something? Victoria said. And I want complete honesty. Always. What if I'm the villain? What if I'm destroying my marriage over ego and hurt feelings? What if I'm just being vindictive? Sophie set down her coffee with deliberate care. Okay, real talk. You ready? Yes. You're not destroying your marriage. Preston destroyed it 3 years ago when he decided you were decorative. You're just acknowledging the reality he created. But the corporate takeover part is you protecting your daughter's inheritance from a man who's embezzling. That's not villainy, that's responsibility. The board will think I'm vindictive. The board will see evidence of fraud and be grateful someone stopped it before the company collapsed. Sophie leaned forward. Victoria, listen to me. You're not being mean. You're not weighing unfair. You're being strategic. There's a difference. Victoria wanted to believe her, wanted to accept that what she was doing was justified. I miss who I was, she said quietly. Before Preston. Before I started making myself smaller. Sophie's expression softened. Tell me about her. Who was Victoria Ashford before she became Mrs. Preston Sterling? Victoria closed her eyes, remembering. She was ambitious, confident. She negotiated $12 million mergers on 3 hours of sleep. She ran marathons. She spoke 4 languages. She terrified men in boardrooms. What happened to her? I convinced myself that love meant becoming smaller, that being a good wife meant supporting his dreams instead of pursuing mine, that making him feel big was more important than being myself. She's still in there, Sophie said firmly. She's just been waiting. For what? For permission, for the right moment. For you to remember that you don't need his approval to be extraordinary. Victoria opened her eyes. Sophie was watching her with fierce love. I've been so angry, Victoria admitted, watching him erase you over 3 years, watching you dim and shrink and apologize for existing. I wanted to punch him at your wedding. What stopped you? You looked happy. I thought maybe I was wrong. Maybe he really did love you and I was being overprotective. You weren't wrong. I know, and I'm sorry I didn't say something sooner. I should have told you that his behavior was unacceptable, that dismissing you wasn't love, that you deserve better. I wouldn't have listened. I was too invested in the fantasy of partnership. Sophie pulled out her phone. Can I show you something? I've been keeping this for months, waiting for the right time. She opened a folder of screenshots, social media posts, all of Preston, taking credit for Victoria's work, business magazine interviews where he never mentioned his wife's contributions, board meeting minutes where he dismissed her questions. I've been documenting everything, Sophie said. Every time he took credit, every time he interrupted you, Every time he made you feel small. 8 months of evidence. Victoria scrolled through the screenshots, page after page of systematic erasure. Why keep all this? Because I knew you'd doubt yourself. I knew Preston would gaslight you into thinking you were overreacting. I wanted proof that you weren't crazy, that this pattern was real. Victoria's throat tightened. You've been protecting me all along. That's what friends do. They sat together looking through the evidence of Victoria's systematic diminishment. It should have been depressing. Instead, Victoria felt validated. I'm not crazy. I'm not hormonal. I'm not overreacting. This happened. All of it. He did this to me. Thank you, Victoria whispered. For what? For seeing me when I couldn't see myself. Sophie hugged her carefully around the baby bump. Tomorrow, everyone else sees you too. The real you. The brilliant, strategic, unstoppable Victoria Ashford Sterling. After Sophie left, Victoria practiced her speech one more time, standing in front of the bathroom mirror as she had so many times before. Good afternoon. For those who don't know me, I'm Victoria Ashford Sterling, and as of today, I'm the majority shareholder of Sterling Industries. Her reflection stared back, pregnant, tired, ready. She touched her belly. The baby was quiet today, as if she knew something important was coming, as if she was resting before the storm. Tomorrow changes everything, Victoria whispered, for both of us. The baby kicked once, strong, certain, message received. Victoria spent the afternoon alone in the nursery, surrounded by preparations for a life she'd been building in secret. Baby clothes, furniture, books about parenting, all the physical preparations while she plotted her husband's professional destruction. The contradiction no longer bothered her. She was creating and destroying simultaneously, making space for new life while demolishing the structures that would have suffocated that life. Her phone buzzed. Eleanor, final check, everything ready? Yes. Nervous? Terrified. Good. Means you're taking this seriously. I'll see you tomorrow at 10. Victoria looked around the nursery, yellow walls, white furniture, a mobile with moons and stars. She'd painted this room herself while Preston claimed to be traveling for business, but was actually at a resort with Bethany. She'd assembled the furniture during her second trimester, following incomprehensible instructions while her back ached and her feet swelled. She'd built this sanctuary alone, just like she'd built everything else in her life. Tomorrow she'd claim what she'd built, publicly, undeniably. Victoria sat in the rocking chair, hands on her belly, feeling her daughter's movements. Strong kicks. This baby was a fighter. I'm going to be okay. Win or lose, I'm going to be okay. Because I've spent 8 months proving to myself that I can do the impossible while growing a human. If I can buy a company in secret while pregnant, I can do anything. Evening arrived. Preston came home on time, which was so unusual that Victoria immediately suspected something. I want to take you to dinner, he announced. Just us, before the baby comes and everything changes. When Because you're right, I've been distant. I want to fix that. Victoria studied his face. Was this genuine? Or was Preston sensing her withdrawal and trying to reel her back in? Either way, she was curious. They went to the restaurant where they had had their first date. Expensive, elegant, the kind of place where conversations happened in hushed tones. Preston ordered wine for himself, sparkling water for Victoria. Made a show of being attentive, asking about her day, her feelings, her thoughts about the baby. Victoria answered carefully, wondering what game he was playing. I've been thinking, Preston said over their entrees. After the baby comes, maybe you should get more involved in the company again. Your business insight, it was valuable. Was, past tense, as if her intelligence had expired. What changed your mind, Victoria asked. I realized I've been taking you for granted. You helped build Sterling Industries. You deserve credit. Too little, too late. That's generous, Victoria said neutrally. I mean it. I want us to be partners again, like we used to be. Except they'd never been partners. She'd been the architect while he collected credit. But Victoria just smiled and nodded. After dinner, they walked through the city. Preston held her hand, performative affection. She led him, curious about his sudden change in behavior. Had Diane warned him? Did he suspect something? Or was this just a man who'd finally noticed his wife was pulling away and was making a last-minute effort to keep her? "I love you," Preston said as they stood outside their building. Victoria looked at him, really looked. Tried to remember when she'd last believed those words. "I know," she said. Not "I love you too," just no. If he noticed the omission, he didn't comment. They rode the elevator in silence. 42 floors, each one a second closer to tomorrow. In their penthouse, Preston tried to kiss her. Really kiss her. Not the perfunctory kisses they'd exchanged for months, something deeper. Victoria pulled back gently. "I'm tired. The babies have been active today." Disappointment flickered across his face. "Right, of course." She went to bed alone, leaving Preston in the living room with his wine and his phone. In the dark, Victoria counted ceiling tiles she couldn't see. 42, always 42. Tomorrow, everything changes. Tomorrow, Preston would see her. Really see her. Tomorrow, the decorative wife would become the majority shareholder. Tomorrow, justice. Victoria fell asleep with her hands on her belly, feeling her daughter's strong kicks. They were ready. Victoria woke at 5 in the morning, too anxious to sleep. The shareholders' meeting started at 10. 5 hours, 300 minutes until everything changed. She showered carefully, dressed in a navy maternity dress that somehow looked both professional and 8 months pregnant. Eleanor had insisted on the specific dress. Power color, serious but not aggressive. Victoria did her makeup with shaking hands. Foundation, mascara, lipstick in a shade called Confident Red. The armor of professional women everywhere. Preston was already up, reviewing his presentation in his office. He seemed relaxed, confident, had no idea what was coming. "Big day," he called out when he saw her. "Yes, it is. Want to ride together? I'll meet you there. I have an errand first." She left before he could question it. Eleanor was waiting at a coffee shop 2 blocks from the Sterling Industries building. She wore a charcoal suit that screamed attorney. Her briefcase probably held enough evidence to destroy kingdoms. "How are you feeling?" Eleanor asked. "Like I'm about to jump off a cliff." "You're about to fly me. There's a difference." They reviewed the plan one last time. Victoria would sit quietly through Preston's annual presentation. Let him take credit for everything. Let him feel secure and confident. Then, at the end, during the question period, Victoria would stand, would introduce herself properly as majority shareholder, would present evidence of embezzlement and fraud. The board would vote. Preston would be removed. Victoria would become acting CEO. Simple, devastating, irreversible. "You have your speech memorized?" Eleanor asked. "I could recite it in my sleep." "Diane confirms she's voting with you." "Yes, her proxy votes are secured." "Then there's nothing left but execution." They walked to the building together. 42 floors. Victoria had helped build this empire. Now she was taking it back. The boardroom was already filling with shareholders. Marcus Brennan sat beside the chair reserved for Preston. Julian Cross reviewed documents, his expression thoughtful. Various investors and board members took their seats. Diane Sterling arrived dressed in pearls and quiet fury. She caught Victoria's eye. The slightest nod of support. Preston entered at 9:55, radiating confidence. He set up his presentation, greeted board members, made jokes that earned polite laughter. He barely glanced at Victoria, seated at the main table now, instead of the spouse section. If he noticed the change, he didn't comment. The meeting began precisely at 10. "Good morning," Preston said, commanding the room as he always did. "Thank you all for attending Sterling Industries' annual shareholders meeting." Victoria watched him perform, charismatic, engaging, taking credit for strategies she'd created, expansion she'd planned, partnerships she'd negotiated. Around her, board members nodded and smiled, impressed by Preston's vision. "My vision," Victoria thought. "My work. My genius you've been selling as your own." "Our 5-year expansion strategy," Preston continued, clicking to a slide Victoria had designed, "positions us as market leaders across 3 continents." Victoria's hands rested on her belly. The baby was active today. Strong kicks, as if she knew something important was happening. "Revenue growth of 35%, Preston announced proudly. Market share expansion, strategic acquisitions, all part of my comprehensive vision for Sterling Industries' future. His vision, his comprehensive strategy, his leadership. The lies were exhausting. Halfway through Preston's presentation, Victoria stood. Point of order. The room went silent. Preston looked at her with barely concealed irritation. Victoria, this isn't appropriate. Please let me finish. She remained standing, one hand on the table for balance. Actually, Mr. Sterling, as majority shareholder, I can call for order whenever I want. Confusion rippled through the room. Preston laughed nervously. What are you talking about? Eleanor stood, moving to stand beside Victoria. She began distributing folders to every board member. Allow me to explain. Victoria watched Preston's face as understanding began to dawn. The laughter faded. Confusion shifted to disbelief. Over the past 8 months, Victoria said, her voice steady despite her racing heart, through 3 separate shell companies, I have acquired 60% of Sterling Industries. My documentation is impeccable. My purchases were legal. As of this moment, I hold controlling interest in this company. Preston's face went white, then red. That's impossible. It's documented in the folders Eleanor is distributing. Every share purchase, every transaction, every legal structure that made this possible. Marcus Brennan frantically flipped through his folder. Julian Cross read slowly, his expression shifting from surprise to something resembling respect. You can't, Preston stammered. You don't have that kind of money. I do, actually. I've always had it. Victoria smiled, a sharp, dangerous smile. You just never asked about my trust fund because you assumed I needed you. Victoria watched Preston's face cycle through emotions like flipping through channels. Disbelief, confusion, anger. She'd seen that progression before. Every time she'd challenged him, every time she'd been right about something he was wrong about. The difference was this time she wasn't apologizing. This time she wasn't making herself smaller. This time she just stood there, 8 months pregnant, and let him feel the full weight of his own dismissal coming back to crush him. This is fraud, Preston said, his voice rising. She manipulated. Nothing was manipulated, Eleanor interrupted calmly. Every purchase was conducted through legal channels, private sales from willing shareholders. Ms. Sterling exercised her right to acquire stock in a company her strategic work helped build. But she's my wife. She can't just... Can't what? Victoria asked. Make independent financial decisions? Invest my own inheritance? Protect my daughter's future from a man who's been embezzling company funds? The room went deadly quiet. That's a lie, Preston said. Additionally, Victoria continued, I'm presenting evidence of financial impropriety. Eleanor distributed a second set of folders, bank records showing irregular transfers, email exchanges between Mr. Mao, Sterling and board member Marcus Brennan coordinating personal investments using corporate funds, text messages discussing kickbacks from vendors, all documented, all verified by forensic accountants. Marcus Brennan stood abruptly. This is a setup. You can't believe... Sit down, Marcus, Julian Cross said, his voice cold. I've been reviewing these quarterly reports for months. The discrepancies Victoria questioned, they're real and damning. Preston tried to spin it. She's lying. She's hormonal. Pregnant women aren't rational. Enough, Eleanor's voice cut through the chaos. I'm Ms. Sterling's attorney. Every document has been verified by forensic accountants. Every transaction traced. Every kickback documented. Additionally, we have testimonies from 5 women regarding sexual harassment. Your former assistant, Bethany Monroe, is prepared to testify in exchange for immunity. The room erupted, board members shouting questions, Preston trying to defend himself, Marcus Brennan looking for exits. Victoria stood quietly in the center of the chaos, one hand on her belly, waiting. Julian Cross banged his gavel. Order. We need order. Slowly the room settled, everyone looking at Victoria with new eyes, not the decorative wife, not the pregnant woman to be patronized, someone dangerous, someone who'd been hiding in plain sight. The board must vote, Julian said. The evidence presented suggests serious fraud. Combined with Ms. Sterling's majority ownership, we need to decide on leadership. You can't do this, Preston said, his voice desperate. I built this company. We built this company, Victoria corrected quietly. But I was too busy supporting you to notice you were destroying it. I demand a recess, Preston insisted. Time to prepare a defense. Denied, Julian said. We'll vote now. All in favor of removing Preston Sterling as CEO and installing Victoria Ashford Sterling as acting CEO? Silence. The longest seconds of Victoria's life. Then Diane Sterling stood. Every head turned. Preston looked at his mother with desperate hope. I vote for removal, Diane said clearly, and I support Victoria as acting CEO. Preston looked like he'd been struck. Mother? I'm protecting your daughter's inheritance, Diane said, her voice shaking but determined. Something you were too arrogant to do yourself. Julian Cross voted next, for removal and new leadership. One by one, board members voted, some reluctantly, some with clear satisfaction. Marcus Brennan abstained, too implicated to vote either way. Final count, 7-2. Preston Sterling was no longer CEO of Sterling Industries. Victoria Ashford Sterling 'twas. Preston stared at her across the boardroom. You planned this, all of it. Yes. You manipulated everyone. I protected everyone, from you. I'll fight this. I'll sue. I'll destroy you. Victoria felt something shift inside her. Not the baby. Something deeper. The final piece of her old self falling away. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clear, like walking out of a dark house into sunlight. I'd spent 3 years making myself smaller, quieter, less threatening. I'd apologized for my intelligence, downplayed my achievements, pretended his dismissals didn't hurt. And for what? To preserve a marriage that was already dead? To protect a man who'd been robbing me blind? No, this wasn't revenge. This was resurrection. You can try, Victoria said calmly, but you'll lose, just like you're losing now. Preston left the boardroom escorted by security. Marcus Brennan followed, already calling lawyers. The remaining board members stared at Victoria with varying expressions of shock and respect. Meeting adjourned, Victoria said. We'll reconvene next week to discuss transition plans. She walked out of the boardroom on Eleanor's arm, her legs shaking. They made it to Eleanor's office before Victoria collapsed into a chair. You did it, Eleanor said. I did it. How do you feel? Victoria pressed both hands to her belly. The baby was quiet now, resting after the excitement. I deserve to be seen. I deserve credit for my work. I deserve respect in my marriage. And if I can't have those things, I deserve the power to build a better life without them. Damn right. Victoria's phone buzzed. 17 missed calls from Preston, 8 from Diane, 3 from Sophie. She called Sophie first. Tell me you destroyed him, Sophie said immediately. I destroyed him. Details. I need details. Victoria laughed, the sound half relief, half hysteria. Later, I need to process first. Fair. I'm bringing champagne, well, sparkling cider for you and actual champagne for me. See you tonight. Victoria ended the call and looked at Eleanor. What happens now? Now you run a company, you have a baby. You build the life you deserve. What about Preston? What about him? He's no longer your problem. But he was. Even removed from the company, Preston was still her husband, still the father of her baby, still connected to her in ways that couldn't be severed with corporate votes. Victoria thought about that as she left Eleanor's office. The reality of what she'd done was settling in. She'd destroyed her marriage publicly, had humiliated the man she'd once loved, had become the wife who brought down her husband. The tabloids would have a field day. But as Victoria stepped outside into spring sunshine, she felt something unexpected. Peace. Not triumph. Not vindication. Just peace. She'd stopped pretending, stopped accommodating, stopped making herself small. She was seen. Finally, completely, undeniably seen. And it felt like breathing after 3 years underwater. 3 weeks after the shareholders meeting, Victoria's water broke during her first board meeting as CEO. She was presenting third-quarter projections when warmth spread down her legs. Everyone stared as she looked at the puddle forming on expensive carpet. We need to adjourn early, Victoria said calmly. Julian Cross stood immediately. Someone call an ambulance. My hospital bag is in the office. I planned ahead. Sophie appeared within minutes, somehow sensing the emergency. She grabbed Victoria's bag and helped her to the elevator. You're having this baby like a bus, Sophie said, mid-board meeting. I'm having this baby because she's coming. Contractions started during the drive. Sophie ran 3 red lights. Don't crash, Victoria managed. I didn't survive Preston just to die in a car accident. Dr. Rachel Winters was waiting at the hospital. She examined Victoria quickly. 6 centimeters. This baby is moving fast. She takes after her mother. Hours blurred into pain and breathing. Sophie held her hand while Eleanor handled phone calls outside. Preston called 8 times. Eleanor answered on the 9th. She's in labor. No, you can't visit. She'll contact you when ready. At 11:42 that night, Victoria's daughter entered the world with a strong cry. 7 pounds, 6 ounces. Perfect. They placed the baby on Victoria's chest, tiny, warm, crying with impressive volume. Hi, baby girl, Victoria whispered. I'm your mom. I've been waiting to meet you. The baby stopped crying, recognizing her voice. We've had quite an adventure already, but the best parts are just beginning. Sophie cried openly. Eleanor got teary. Name? The nurse asked. Margot, Victoria said. Margot Eleanor Sterling. Eleanor's eyes widened. You didn't have to. I wanted to. You helped me become myself again. Margot was perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, dark hair like Victoria's. Nothing of Preston visible yet. Victoria held her daughter, exhausted and triumphant. You did it, Sophie said. You survived. You fought back. You won, while growing a human. I'm exhausted. That too. Eleanor returned with updates. Preston is demanding visitation. I've filed for temporary custody restrictions pending the fraud investigation. Diane sent flowers. The board wants to know when you'll return. 6 weeks. Standard maternity leave. You're really taking time off? I spent 8 months acquiring a company in secret. I've earned a break. Victoria held Margot, marveling at how something so small represented such enormous change. Your dad's complicated, she whispered. He loves you already. But love doesn't excuse behavior. Remember that someday. She stayed in the hospital 2 days. Preston sent gifts, flowers, desperate messages asking to meet his daughter. Victoria ignored them. She wasn't ready. On discharge day, she went to a brownstone in a quieter neighborhood. She'd bought it during her 7th month while Preston was distracted by corporate chaos. 3 bedrooms, a small garden, space for Margot to grow without 42 floors of glass. Sophie had moved Victoria's belongings while she was hospitalized. The nursery was ready. Yellow walls, white furniture, a mobile with moons and stars, just like the nursery she'd planned in the penthouse. But this one was hers alone. Weeks passed. Margot demanded constant attention, feeding every 3 hours. Endless crying Victoria learned to interpret. Sophie visited daily with food and help. Eleanor brought legal documents. The fraud investigation was proceeding. Preston faced potential criminal charges. Diane called, asking to visit. Victoria agreed, curious. Diane arrived with practical gifts. Diapers, wipes, a good baby carrier. She's beautiful, Diane said, holding Margot carefully. She is. Awkward silence stretched between them. I'm sorry, Diane finally said, for how I treated you, for dismissing you, for enabling Preston's behavior. Why did you? Because it was easier than admitting my son was like his father. Easier than facing truth about my own marriage. Diane looked at Margot. Watching you fight back showed me what strength actually looks like. Strength is expensive. So is weakness. Weakness cost me my self-respect. Years spent accommodating a man who didn't deserve it. After Diane left, Victoria rocked Margot, thinking about 3 generations of women, each learning different lessons about survival. 4 weeks after Margot's birth, Preston finally called Victoria directly. Please, he said, let me meet my daughter. Why should I? Because she's mine too. I'm her father. Rights are earned. You've spent weeks sending gifts instead of doing the work. What work? Therapy, Victoria said. Real therapy. Actually dealing with why you treat women like they're disposable. That's not fair. It's completely fair. You cheated 5 times. You stole from the company. You dismissed me for 3 years. If you can't understand why that needs addressing, you're not ready for our daughter's life." Silence. "I loved you," Preston said quietly. "I still do. You loved what I could do for you. That's not the same. Is there any chance for us?" Victoria looked at sleeping Margot. "I don't know, maybe someday, but not now, not until you prove you understand what you destroyed." "I'll do the therapy." "Good. Eleanor will coordinate supervised visitation once your therapist confirms progress." She ended the call before he could argue. 2 months later, Preston's therapist confirmed he was making progress. Victoria scheduled supervised visitation, neutral location, Eleanor's office, 1 hour with the nanny present. Preston arrived early, holding a teddy bear. He looked different, thinner, tired, less arrogant. "Thank you," he said, "for giving me this chance. This isn't for you, it's for her." Preston held his daughter for the first time. Tears slid down his face. "She's beautiful." "She is. She looks like you." Margot gripped his finger with surprising strength. "I'm sorry," Preston said, "for everything. For how I treated you, for the affairs, for stealing, for dismissing your intelligence, for all of it." Victoria watched carefully. Was this real or performance? "Dr. Chen says you are making progress." "Therapy is hard. Facing what I did to you is brutal." "It should be. Is there any chance you could forgive me? Not now, but someday?" "Maybe," Victoria said honestly, "but forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. I can forgive you and still know we shouldn't be together." "I understand." "Do you? Because the Preston I married wouldn't have understood that distinction." "I'm trying to be different." Margot started fussing. Victoria took her back. "You can visit once a week, supervised. We'll reassess in 3 months." "Thank you." "Don't thank me, just show up, consistently." 3 months passed. Preston attended weekly visits. Consistent, present, learning to hold Margot, change diapers, soothe her crying. He was trying. The company continued thriving. Victoria implemented new policies: maternity leave for all employees, childcare assistance, promotion transparency. She fixed the culture Preston had poisoned. Diane became a regular presence, a surprisingly doting grandmother. Sophie remained constant, the friend who always showed up. Victoria was exhausted, running on 4 hours of sleep, balancing meetings with feeding schedules, but she was herself, fully, completely, undeniably. The woman hidden under accommodation was gone. Someone stronger remained. Victoria Ashford Sterling, CEO, mother, survivor. 6 months after Margot's birth, divorce proceedings concluded. Preston signed without fighting. He got supervised visitation. Victoria got primary custody in the brownstone. "It's over," Eleanor said, presenting final documents. Victoria signed with confident strokes, nothing like her tentative wedding signature 3 years ago. "How do you feel?" Free, she was. The marriage that suffocated her was legally ended. She was no longer decorative wife. She was Victoria Ashford Sterling, CEO and mother. Different. Better. That evening, Sophie organized a small celebration. Just Victoria, Sophie, Eleanor, plus sleeping Margot. They gathered at Victoria's brownstone. Sophie brought champagne. Victoria could finally drink, having stopped nursing. "To freedom," Sophie toasted. "To refusing to be erased," Eleanor added. "To survival," Victoria said, "and teaching my daughter what strength looks like." The champagne tasted like possibility. "The day I decided to buy the company," Victoria said, "I wasn't trying to hurt Preston. I was trying to save myself." "You chose yourself," Sophie said, finally, after 3 years of choosing him. They sat in comfortable silence. Autumn leaves fell outside. The brownstone smelled like home. "What's next?" Eleanor asked. Victoria looked at sleeping Margot, 6 months old, sitting up, eating solid foods, developing a demanding, stubborn, perfect personality. "Now I raise my daughter, I run my company, I build the life I deserve." "No dating plans?" "God, no. I'm barely managing work and motherhood." "Someday, though?" "Maybe. When I'm ready. When Margot's older. When I've healed enough to trust again." Weeks later, a business magazine requested an interview. The headline, How One Woman Saved Her Company While Pregnant. The journalist asked about the shareholders meeting. I was terrified, Victoria admitted, but I was done being invisible. Your husband had been taking credit for your work for 3 years. Every strategy, every partnership, every analysis. He presented it as his vision. What made you fight back? The baby. I couldn't let my daughter grow up watching her mother disappear. Any regrets? No regrets. Sometimes the only way to save yourself is to burn down the structures suffocating you. The article went viral. Women flooded Victoria's inbox, sharing their own stories of erasure and dismissal. You're a hero, messages said. You showed me it's possible to choose yourself. Preston called, angry. You made me look terrible. I told the truth. Our daughter will read that someday. Good. She'll learn her mother refused to be erased. 9 months after the shareholders meeting, Sterling Industries announced record profits. The board approached Victoria. We want to remove acting from your title, make you permanent CEO. What about Preston's ownership? He's a passive shareholder, no operational authority. That's all you. I accept. She was done apologizing for surviving. Margot turned 1 year old in November. Victoria threw a party in her brownstone garden. Sophie, Eleanor, Diane, and close friends attended. Preston came separately, bringing an age-appropriate toy he'd clearly researched. He was trying, still in therapy, still working on himself. Victoria watched him play with Margot. Their daughter lit up seeing him. Preston had been consistent with visits. He'd earned her affection. Thank you, Preston said quietly in the kitchen, for not poisoning her against me. I'd never do that. Some women would. I'm not some women. Awkward silence stretched between them. A year of separation, a year of healing and hurting and rebuilding. I'm proud of you, Preston said. The company, what you've built. I should have said that 3 years ago. Yes, you should have. I know sorry doesn't fix anything. But I am, genuinely. Dr. Chen helped me understand how deeply I hurt you, how I systematically destroyed your confidence while claiming to love you. Victoria studied his face. He looked sincere. I believe you are sorry, but sorry doesn't mean we should be together. I know. I'm not asking for that. I just needed you to know. Margot toddled over, babbling. She reached for Preston. He picked her up, and she laughed. Victoria's heart ached. This was the family she'd imagined, but imagination didn't survive reality. You're a good father when you show up. Keep showing up. I will. I promise. After the party, Victoria sat in the nursery with Margot. Her daughter was walking now, talking in broken sentences, growing impossibly fast. Your first birthday, Victoria whispered. You've taught me so much. Margot played with blocks, stacking and knocking them down enthusiastically. Victoria looked at her daughter and realized something profound. She'd spent 3 years pretending to be small, because she thought that's what love required. But the greatest gift she could give Margot wasn't stability or wealth or happiness. It was the example of a woman who refused to be erased, who fought back with strategy, who proved that being dismissed doesn't mean being defeated. The brownstone creaked with evening sounds. Victoria walked through her home, touching furniture she'd chosen, looking at walls she'd painted, breathing air that didn't smell like compromise. This was hers, not Preston's, not borrowed. Hers. Her laptop showed 3 acquisition offers, all addressed to CEO Victoria Ashford Sterling. Not wife of, just her name, her title, her earned authority. She made hot tea. Proper hot tea, not the lukewarm compromise she'd accepted for 3 years. Small victories added up to a life she'd built herself. Sophie texted, "How was the party?" "Good, exhausting, perfect." "Preston behaving?" "Surprisingly, yes, he's actually trying." "Think you'll ever forgive him?" Victoria considered. "I don't know, but I've stopped waiting for an apology to heal. I'm healing anyway." "That's growth." She finished her tea and returned to the nursery. Margot had fallen asleep surrounded by toys. Victoria transferred her to the crib, covering her with a soft blanket. "Sweet dreams, baby girl." Tomorrow we keep building. Outside, the city continued. People living complicated lives, making mistakes, finding courage, surviving. Victoria climbed into her smaller bed. Enough space. More than enough. Exhaustion from motherhood and CEO responsibilities settled into her bones. But underneath was something new. Something that hadn't existed 3 years ago. Certainty. She'd done the impossible. Bought a company while pregnant. Faced down her husband before shareholders. Chose her daughter's future over her husband's ego. She'd refused to be erased. And in refusing, she'd found herself again. Every time Preston dismissed her, he was actually giving her permission to stop caring what he thought. He freed her by showing his approval was worthless. The prison door had been unlocked all along. She just needed to stop asking his permission to walk through it. Now she wasn't walking. She was running. And her daughter would run beside her someday, never knowing what it felt like to make yourself small for a man who couldn't see your size. Victoria fell asleep with moonlight through windows she'd chosen, in a home she'd bought, next to a nursery where her daughter dreamed. She'd survived, transformed. From decorative wife to majority shareholder, from dismissed partner to CEO, from woman making herself small to woman claiming every inch of deserved space. The journey cost her marriage, her certainty, 3 years accommodating a man who couldn't see her value, but it gave her something more important, herself. 18 months later, Victoria sat in her office on a Tuesday morning reviewing acquisition proposals. Sterling Industries had been named one of the fastest growing companies in the industry. Margot was 18 months old now, talking in full sentences, opinionated about everything. She spent mornings at Progressive Preschool and afternoons with Victoria in the office play space. Preston maintained weekly visits. 2 years of therapy completed. His own consulting firm was succeeding through merit. They'd achieved functional co-parenting, not friendship, but mutual respect focused on Margot. Diane was a constant presence. She'd apologized repeatedly for enabling Preston. Their relationship had transformed into something almost maternal. Sophie remained the anchor. Eleanor had become mentor and friend. The intercom buzzed. "Miss Sterling, Julian Cross from the board." "Send him in." Julian entered carrying a folder, looking nervous. "The board has been discussing succession planning. You've transformed this company in 2 years. Revenue up 40%. Employee satisfaction at all-time highs. Industry recognition. Thank you. We want to offer you a 10-year contract. Guaranteed CEO position. Significant equity increase. Complete operational authority." Victoria stared at the contract. 10 years. Security. Recognition. What about Preston's shares? He's agreed to sell half his remaining stake. He'll retain 20% for Margot's inheritance. He's supporting your long-term leadership. Victoria read carefully. Everything was favorable. Validation and legal terms. "I'll have Eleanor review it, but I'm inclined to accept." "Good. The board is unanimous." After Julian left, Victoria looked at the contract. 10 years. She'd be 40. Margot would be 11. A decade of stability stretched ahead. Preston called. "Julian told me you're accepting." "I am." "Good. You deserve it. You built this company while I was busy stealing credit. It should have been yours all along." They talked about Margot, about schedules and holidays, comfortable logistics of co-parenting. When Victoria hung up, she felt nothing. No anger, no longing, just acceptance. Margot burst in at 3. "Mama!" "Hi, baby, how was school?" "I painted." Margot held up paper covered in enthusiastic brushstrokes. "It's beautiful. Tell me about it." Margot launched into detailed toddler explanation. Victoria listened, engaging with her daughter's world. This was success, not the CEO title, not industry recognition, not the contract. This, her daughter's happiness, her own peace, the life she'd built from marriage ashes. That evening after Margot slept, Victoria made tea. The ritual had become meditation. Her laptop showed emails from women who'd read her story, asking for advice, sharing experiences, looking for courage. Victoria answered them all, offering what she'd learned, that choosing yourself isn't selfish, that refusing erasure is survival. She walked through her home, Margot's toys scattered, photos showing their life together, evidence of life lived fully. Victoria touched Margot's doorframe, watching her daughter sleep, peaceful, secure, growing up watching her mother claim space unapologetically. "I did it," Victoria whispered. "We survived. Through corporate coups and public divorces, through sleepless nights and impossible decisions, they'd survived, thrived." Victoria Ashford Sterling, CEO, mother, woman who refused to be erased. She was enough. She was extraordinary. She was free. And her daughter would never know what it felt like to make yourself small for a man who couldn't see your size. That was victory. That was justice. That was everything. Victoria's story reminds us that sometimes the quietest revolution is the most powerful. She didn't yell. She didn't beg for respect. She just built her empire in secret until she was strong enough to be seen. If this story resonated with you, if you know someone who needs to hear that being dismissed doesn't mean being defeated, hit that like button. Drop a comment telling me what you would have done in Victoria's position. I read every single one. Share this with someone who needs to remember their power. And subscribe, because I've got more stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things when pushed to their limits. Remember, you're not crazy, you're not overreacting, and you're definitely not alone. Until next time, keep building in secret until you're ready to be seen.